we've done almost 600 loans, and I think it's now almost closer to 130 million in total fundings. Like right now today, we have like 110 active loans out.
110.
Yeah, and about 30 million in volume.
Welcome to How to Real Estate Podcast, a podcast to help you start, elevate, and catapult your real estate investing career. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new podcast that we post every single Monday. Jared tested.
Jana approved.
Hi guys, welcome to How to Real Estate Podcast. This is Jared.
And this is Jana.
And our podcast is designed to help elevate and catapult your real estate investing career.
Welcome to all the listeners. Today our guest is a principal in the Sierra West Capital, which provides funding for short-term real estate projects. To date, SWC has funded over 560 transactions and 119 million in volume. Our guest got his start in real estate in 2004 by actively buying and selling his own properties and has purchased and resold over 400 single-family homes since by utilizing value-add strategies like fix and flips. He received a master's in real estate development from the University of Utah in 2015 and a Bachelor of Science degree in finance, also from the U of U in 2001. He's a member of the Board of Realtors, for the Salt Lake Board of Realtors, since 2001 as a sales agent, but since 2007 he got his broker's license and he's been doing that since. But most importantly, he's married to the most awesome human ever, m.b.strong, and has 3 equally cool kids, Berkeley, Peyton, and Wilder. Is that
Wilder,
right?
yeah.
All right. Well, today we have Matt Strong here with us. Matt, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no problem. So Matt, you are a hard money lender.
Correct.
So what is a hard money lender, for those that don't know?
That sounds kind of scary, right? Like hard money.
Yes, it does.
So as far as I understand where that came from, right? Think of hard as in typically you're lending to somebody on a hard asset. That's kind of like where the hard money comes into play because you're lending on a hard asset.
I see.
And in my case, 9.5 times out of 10, it is typically a single family home, right? So a hard money lender would provide the financing for somebody on typically like a fix and flip, right? So let's back up a little bit. A lot of people out there are looking to get into a first deal, right? And so the lowest barrier to entry is typically a fix and flip. And so, Jared, I know you wholesale, right?
Yeah.
So the timetable that one needs to close on a wholesale deal sometimes is like 2 days, right?
Oh yeah.
So, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, whatever mortgage broker, you're just not going to have time to get a loan application in, an appraisal, blah, blah, blah,
right,
blah, blah.
by the time you get all that done.
Right, so a hard money lender comes into play for kind of 2 reasons. One, timing. You got to be quick. And then you've got to be able to accept the collateral in the condition it's in, which is usually really, really crappy, right? Because it's a distressed property. So that's where we're typically looking at the hard asset, the property, in the condition it is, and considering the fact that there's going to be rehab and value add done to it, which is going to improve the condition. And then that home will be worth a heck of a lot more, a lot of times 30 to 40, maybe even 50% more than when you start, right? And then that's where we can get comfortable because we can say, great, if we can lend on this, it's worth X now, it's going to be worth Y later, and then in between, you need to do all this stuff to get it to that point. That's where the creation of that value provides all of us, the borrower and the hard money lender, protection that we're good to lend pretty much just based off of that property, right? So we're really lending not so much on the qualifications of the borrower, but on the asset of the collateral that we're loaning against.
So do you even look at the credit of the borrower, or is it just like I'm looking at the deal itself, or what do you, as far as borrower, what do you need as a borrower?
So, I don't want to say we don't care about the borrower because we clearly do. I joke sometimes that we just want to make sure you have a pulse, right? But it is important because even a really good property at a really good price can get screwed up by the wrong borrower, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, and this is just for me that I'm speaking. Other hard money lenders may have way different criteria. Everyone can play the game a little bit differently.
Right.
But typically we do not require like a credit report and stuff like that because maybe if it's an extreme case where it's kind of an oddball deal or they're asking for something that we're not usually used to providing. But I want to really make sure that the borrower understands what they're getting into, that understands their own numbers that they're providing to me, and that has the capability, first and foremost, to have, the rehab funds, the crew, the contractor, or the ability to do it themselves to create that value. Because if that borrower if they're not able to perform, it's kind of pointless to do the loan, because the house is going to stay in the same condition.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to have to do it myself as the lender, to be able to, because the only way we get paid back typically, sometimes it's through a refinance, but the house needs to sell.
Yeah.
So if someone's buying it at X distressed, it's most likely that in 6 months it's still going to be worth that same price, right? And so the borrower, we want to make sure they have a plan, that they understand what they're getting into, and that they can show the capability that they're going to be able to get it done. And so when I'm interviewing maybe a borrower for the first time, there might be a lot more questions, but a lot of times I have a borrower that's done 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 homes. So I already know they can perform.
Sure.
Then it's just maybe more of verifying their liquidity for maybe a down payment in the rehab. Because even the most successful borrowers, everybody runs out of money. Whether you're on your first one or you're doing 30 at a time, at some point, not everything's going to go to plan, and you're going to get stuck with a ton of rehab money sitting out there. And so anyway, you all want to make sure they have the liquidity and the plan put in place and the ability to execute.
So how much do you, how much of the percentage of the purchase price do you typically loan on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's probably the first question people ask me.
Yeah.
Even before typically, like, what does it cost? Because everyone's concerned about having the money to do it, right? Especially first-time investors. It's like, because you're taught in different training programs or books or whatever that you can do this with no money, right? And so you can do it with no money. But first and foremost, I look at the deal, right? Our average loan to cost is about 85%. So we're typically looking for about 15% of a down payment based off of the purchase price. Now, there's exceptions to every rule. Yes, we do finance 100% at times, and sometimes maybe we only loan 70%. Mm-hmm. I always kind of give the extreme example of, let's say you're buying a house for $100,000, right? And let's say the rehab's $30,000. Okay, let's say then that the ARV, which is after repair value, what that home's going to look like and be valued at when it's fixed up, remodeled, and up for sale. Let's say it's $250,000.
Yeah.
They're just getting like the most incredible deal on earth, right? Which
An incredible deal.
doesn't exist, right? So in that case, like, I would probably even lend 100% plus the rehab money, right? Because our risk position is so low, right? Now, fundamentally, as a lender, it's always good to have skin in the game from the borrower because it makes it take them more serious, right? And so, but let's jump back and say that same example. Someone's buying it for 100. It needs 30 in repair, but let's say it only is going to sell for 160.
Right.
Really, really tight, right? Like, I'm not lending 100% and the rehab, right? Like, I might, in that case, only lend 70,000. Because if someone's going to screw up, I want them to be the one, super selfishly, I got to protect my investors' money.
It's a business.
Yeah. So it's just a risk thing. So my average borrower is buying properties at about 69% of ARV. Not 69% of what they think ARV is, 69% of actually what they end up selling it for.
Right.
Now, a lot of times they'll tell me, they'll estimate that it's going to be way higher than what it really sells for, So, but when reality comes down and we have hard numbers, when I track it, most people are buying stuff at about 69%. Now, I don't know if on all those they're making money, because I don't do that great of a follow-up to do kind of like an exit interview of the loan and say, how much did you make? Which it actually would be helpful because it would provide really valuable feedback for everybody. But when I look at those numbers, so that's a good rule of thumb, for investors out there that are looking for their first deal. If you're kind of coming up where your realistic ARV estimate is about, in your purchase price, you're about 70% of that, odds are you're hunting in the right neighborhood for a deal that might make sense as a flip.
Right.
Of course, it depends on the repairs and all that kind of stuff. But
So you mentioned that a lot of times the flipper will come in and they think the ARV is way higher than it actually really is. So do you kind of do reality check for them, or what? How does that happen? So someone, let's put an example out there. They think it's going to sell for $250. You've obviously been a broker for years. you've done this flips and you think it can sell for 200. So
Yeah.
how would you approach that?
Yeah, because I know you went over kind of what you look for with the borrowers,
Yep.
but what do they have to present to you to get that loan?
Yeah.
Do
That's
they
a great
go to
question.
Redfin or?
And that's a great question. And this one we could spend like a 2-day seminar on, right? But
Day one.
because it is subjective, and it's so stop me if I get off track here. But yes, I always double check. I mean, for sure, I always
Right, you
double
have
check,
to.
right? But I always like to see what they think it is, and I always like to see the comps that they're using, right? Because that'll help me interpret if they know what they're doing or not,
Right.
right? Like, I don't want to bounce around too much, but one time I got some comparables for a property in like Taylorsville, like maybe 13th West, but they were only using like kind of East Murray comps, even though they were the same south coordinate. Like, I mean, it wasn't even in the same ballpark, right? I'm like, okay, these guys
That was
not quite sure what they're doing yet, right? But so yes, that happens all the time. Where maybe well, not all the time. I'd say 70%, 80%. I'm like right in line, plus or minus an amount that's debatable. Whoever you're asking, as far as what that ARV is going to be, and if it is way off, I'll tell them, right? Because I don't want them to do a deal. Well, I don't want to lend on a deal where at least using their numbers, like they don't have a chance to make money.
right.
Right, that's not going to help anyone. All we're going to do is just have problem conversations down the road, and hurt and whatever, right? So we want to make sure that it's lining up. And so, in general, though, I always tell people when you're starting out comping houses, which is using short for finding comparables, doing like a version of an appraisal. Start in the most predictable neighborhoods. Don't start your first time comping and trying to get comfortable with values like in the Cove, right? Because, man, the littlest tweaks in finishes will change what that ARV would look like. But say, Kearns, we were talking before how you like to stick in kind of that first time homeowner neighborhood market for your wholesale deals.
Right.
Those zip codes like Kearns, West Valley, Glendale, Rose Park, Magna, Tooele, like those neighborhoods where all the houses are pretty much the same, built about the same time of year, similar styles, or either whole neighborhoods of brick ramblers or whole neighborhoods of split level homes. Those are the neighborhoods that are going to be so predictable to get your ARV.
Right.
Like those neighborhoods, it's that we're hardly ever off, because you might debate that it could sell for $5,000 or something more or less.
Sure.
But the reality is there's so many comps because there's so many flippers that set the bar. And then those neighborhoods, you got to be super sensitive to, like, does it have a garage? Does it have 2 bathrooms instead of 1? That's where the slight differentiators are going to come. Now, where it gets way harder to comp are in maybe the higher price ranges, where the actual finishes make a huge difference, and maybe the layout, that kind of stuff. In those first time homeowner neighborhoods, you just need to make it really clean, quality. But you could do, you do $5 tile, you're going to get the same value as you would if you did 69-cent tile.
Oh yeah.
Right? Whereas if you did the 69-cent tile, obviously in the Cove,
It never sells.
Yeah.
it's never going to sell. So I mean that's a whole different, like, you ought to have an appraiser on if you don't already have had one to kind of go through the fundamentals. But I'm not a fan of like Redfin, to be honest with you. I think if you're comping houses, you need to have direct access to the MLS. And I know Redfin pulls it from there, but I wouldn't trust a secondary source of data. I would go directly to the MLS and get your comps. And you either have to have a very reliable, trustworthy agent that's been in the game and like had their butt on the line with the deal to pull comps for you, or I always tell people you got to figure out a way whether you get your license or not, or get an admin login. You've got to get good yourself at doing comps, because I hear it all the time. Well, my agent told me it would sell for this.
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, your agent was wrong. I'm sorry. Because sometimes agents, they want to kind of be the superhero and say like, no, it's going to sell for way more.
Yeah.
But that does not help the borrower out, because you got to deal in reality.
Right.
Because what happens is interest accrues month after month, and they're hesitant to drop the price because the agent doesn't want to look stupid that the price really isn't what they said it was going to do.
Yeah.
and then the borrower doesn't know any different. So because they're maybe new, and so, but anyway, so I think you got to have direct access to the MLS at some point. When you're
Right.
new, you've got to rely on other people's advice and opinion.
Well, on top of that, if, like you said, that the agents want to be superheroes sometimes, there's times where you have to be hard, like as an agent, and I have somebody come and, oh, this is going to sell for $500,000, and I'm looking at them like, no, it's not.
Yep.
According to these comps, that's only going to be, let's say $450. But they don't realize that they're hurting themselves, because if it does not appraise for that amount, and the person, whoever buys that property is going to have to come up with a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of newer investors don't realize, that I can give you high comps all day long, but that's not the reality.
No, and sometimes it ends up being super disappointing. I've plenty of loans right now where this is happening, where it's not selling for what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the other part of this equation is, once you're at that point, listen to what the market's telling you.
Yeah.
Like the market is not going to lie. There's every once in a while there's the outlier where a buyer's in the market, they're frustrated, they just want to buy, so you may get a sale price that you wouldn't have gotten 9 times out of 10, just because like magic happened, right? So you've got to throw out the outliers on the high side and low side, deal with the reality of what your average, remodeled comps are selling for to kind of give you your ARV. And I'm wrong at times. I don't want to say I'm never wrong on the first time home buyer, but say I think it's going to be 300 and it sells for 295, I'd say I'm right? Like that's close enough, right?
Yeah.
But every once in a while, like on a higher end home, I'll be shocked at what some guys can pull, but they are experienced investors that just dial in the right architecture, the right finishes, the right floor plan. And that's where I say it's hard, like I have one property right now, when they bought it, I kind of put, because I'll track like what they tell me the ARV is going to be, and then what I think the ARV is going to be, and if it's different, I'll make a note. Just because I like to score keep myself to see how close I was to get better. And there's this one house in the Cove, awesome flipper. He does such an amazing job on his houses, and I think we both kind of thought it was going to be like a $900,000, and he's probably going to get 1.1. That's a huge difference.
Wow.
That's like 200 grand, right? But
Yeah.
you could also execute that house completely wrong and probably only get 700. So you got to also be mindful of what market you're dealing in when you're looking at the comparables.
Right. And if you're starting out and you don't have access to MLS, and it's sure you have to reach out to other people to help you, but do multiple people. So like have multiple realtors, because you're going to have, like you said, that person that wants to be a hero, wants to list the property when it's ready to go, and so they're willing to tell you whatever. But if you have multiple people telling you, like talk to three realtors, they tell you it's going to be around this price range, then you're pretty safe. I mean, not guaranteed, but nothing's guaranteed, but yeah. Yeah,
no, that's a great point, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because the other thing I tell people, no one wants to do it because it's hard, but you can actually walk around neighborhoods, drive around neighborhoods, and any house that you see a sign for, call. Even if you don't have access to the MLS, call and talk to the agents. Ask them, hey, is this house under contract? Well, what did it sell for? Or is it under contract? How good of a job was the remodel? What was it listed at? What's it under contract at? So you can get down and dirty, and there's a ton of money on the line. So it's worth, when you're a new investor, to just cover all your bases, but some people don't want to, because it's hard to do.
Yeah.
So I say, when you're first starting out, you're looking at everything, but pick a neighborhood and just learn how to analyze a neighborhood inside and out. Drive the streets. Know why one house sells for more, on one side of 7th East in one part of town versus, 7th East is an obvious example, right? But, you've got to know the neighborhoods, and it's overwhelming unless you have a real gift and skill for it, to just start trying to learn the whole valley.
Oh, yeah.
Learn one neighborhood at a time, and then you'll learn what you need to learn to know the values, and then start expanding, right? Because then, you'll start seeing Rose Park. You're like, well, gosh, 3-bedroom. I've looked at enough of these to know that 3-bedroom, 1 bath these days is going to be whatever, like $330.
Yeah.
Right? And then you do quick math, like say 70% of $330, whatever that is. Oh, this might be a deal, right? So then it also reduces your evaluation time, on deals, because it's important to be quick. for sure, especially on wholesale deals right now. But it's also important to not waste your time on something that's not going to be a deal.
Yeah. That's great advice, just sticking to even as agents, we're told to just stick to a certain area.
Yeah.
To get familiar with the way the market is in that area.
Yeah, because you'll screw up eventually. I still mess up on houses. I've got 7 or 8 flips going myself right now because I still flip. And, I mess up. We can talk about this later, but the flippers that, like you're kind of mentioned that you're focusing on kind of first-time homeowner markets for wholesaling, right? Yeah. So where I've screwed up a ton is when I'm doing multiple flips, like, say, East Side higher end and West Valley Magna, where maybe it's a little more of a first-time homeowner entry level. It's hard to flip because your mentality changes, right? Like, I'll end up screwing up the house that I should maybe be doing a little nicer. Yeah. Because I don't know.
You get in that mindset, like, all I need to do is carpet and paint and do this certain type of countertops, but the areas it's not going to.
Or where's like the easier flips, they get so simple. Like, you can just the same thing as the last house, right? Yeah. You don't have to think about top. But then, for me anyway, I get kind of exhausted going like, oh crap, I got to pick out like an extra cool tile, And then as you get better at flipping, you learn. Well, okay, I'm dumb. Like, let me hire a designer, right? Yeah, I don't need to be the one that figures all this out, right? Like, let me have someone else help me with this. But
and so with your, because you're a hard money lender, so people are just bringing deals everywhere. Obviously you've been doing it for 15 years, so you feel comfortable enough that the areas that you do work in, like, okay, I have an idea what's going on or all this, or do you only focus in certain areas?
No, generally anything in Salt Lake County. Just I had a virtual assistant a couple years ago take every address that we flipped and throw it up on Google Maps. So it's actually kind of cool because like a little dot, and it's like I'm driving around anywhere in the valley, and it's like, oh, we've done a house over there. Yeah. So it's kind of cool to see. So part of this isn't because I'm like super extra smart. It's just because it's like that 10,000 hour rule, right? Like I've just seen and comped if we've done 400, and just to clarify, like I've been a principal in all those over the years. So I've had one main partner, and so it's not like I'm a solo dude doing all these myself, but I've done them over the years, the bulk of them with an awesome partner of mine. We were always operating under the brokerage MS2, so a lot of people would always go, oh, it's another MS2 house, Yeah. But so it's just experience, right? Like most times people that call me for a Salt Lake deal, like I'm like, in my head, I'm like Google mapping, oh yeah, it's on that street, that's where it is, that's where you think it's going to sell at. Yeah, so usually my underwriting is, we can do that deal, right? Yeah. Like it's just over the phone. Like, sometimes I'm in the back of my head debating, okay, I got to make sure we have the money for it, right? But as far as evaluating the deal, Salt Lake County is pretty automatic to me. I don't see a lot of deals like out in the newer parts, like South Jordan, Harriman, just because they're newer, they're not distressed yet. You can imagine where the bulk of them are coming from. The distressed stuff where financial problems exist for houses on the west side or Rose Park or Glendale, and then on the east side usually it's just estate sales, right? Like grandma passed away and the family's selling the house, and the conditions honestly kind of no different than a trashed house in West Valley because everything needs to be done. You need to gut it and start over.
Put in pretty much. So you still do flips now, right? So if you had a choice, if you had one deal and just overall work or profit margins, what would you rather do? Would you rather flip a house or lend on the house?
That's a great question. I still find a ton of joy and satisfaction, even though it can be an absolute pain in the neck, to take something that's like really dilapidated and see it become really, like there's just an enjoyment I see in that happening. Right? So I still flip because I really like seeing that process. Even though it's, it's smarter for me probably to never flip again and just 100% focus on, getting better at the lending side of it.
Right.
But it continues to add credibility because I'm in the game too. And, borrowers, can ask me for advice or, I'm trying to always build out, the best vendor database and contractors and plumbers and electricians, and so I've actually seen where I've been helpful where I've been able to pass along referrals because I'm using the guys, right? So it is helpful to be walking the walk and talking the talk. So, but I tell people all the time, I'm an open book. I've lost plenty of money on flips. I lose money on flips all the time. I shouldn't say all the time. Like, I'd say 10% of that 400 houses, I bet I've lost, I know I have. I've lost money on 35 of them. I keep track of everything, right? Because I like to go back and look and see what went wrong and why it went wrong. And I mean, even right now, I'm an idiot. I bought a house in Glendale, and I have this new awesome assistant that's helping me, and giving her incentive to find some houses. And so she found one, and I'm like, this is a deal. Let's do it. And so I was just too busy, and I didn't do proper due diligence.
Oh, right.
And this is actually kind of a sad, I'm embarrassed about this, but it is what it is. So like an 1890s house, Glendale, they're all over the place, right? No basement, not even a crawl space. Doing my due diligence when we bought it, I had my guys that were going to work on the house come walk through it with me as well. You could see like concrete around the perimeter of the house. So I'm like, it's got a foundation. We're good, right? Remodel the house. It was kind of a tight deal to begin with. And remodel the house, put up for sale, full price offer. They jumped on their inspections. They're like, we're a little worried that there's not a foundation. And I'm like, well, there's a foundation, but let's just double check for you. Yeah, there's not a foundation.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So 10 more minutes of due diligence would have saved me so much headache.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm guilty of it after all these flips of moving too fast, right? Just moving too fast, assuming you know what's there. So I now have really good contact for a foundation fix company because I'm going to be paying them about $20,000.
Oh, geez.
So this
are you going to lose money on that
deal?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just how much now.
Right.
Because the nice thing is it's in a really predictable resale market, and if I got an offer that quick, I'll get an offer again that quick. But what was going to be, again, this was a skinny one, but what was going to be a solid 15,000, profit is probably now going to be a solid -10.
Yeah.
Right. But that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. I've learned because we got our butt kicked with the downturn. And, there's been plenty of moments where we've lost multiple times on houses back to back. So I've learned to kind of just celebrate the process.
Yeah.
Whether you're winning or losing, right? I will be just as happy when this house sells as maybe the one where I'll make 80 grand on. It's kind of like, this is great. We did it. We bought it. We fixed it up. We sold it, right? So, and in the meantime, you're learning something along the way.
Well, you pay for education. When you think about it, like for example, when you're a college man, like my brother-in-law, he's a chiropractor, and so when he left, he was $100,000 in debt, and as of today, he's $100,000 plus more because of the interest.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, you're paying for education one way or another. So so you learn something from that deal. Like I'm gonna make sure I do that 10 minutes extra of due diligence from here on out.
Yeah.
Cost you how much?
Yeah. I mean, but you learn as long as you move that needle. That's all that really really matters.
Yep.
And you kind of mentioned like the 2008 when kind of downturn. So as a lender, what do you do to kind of hedge your risk when you're lending money out? And because we're in the biggest bull market in history, a correction is going to happen. May or may not be a crash. My crystal ball is not super clear. But a correction will happen eventually. Yep. So how are you hedging risk from a crash or a correction?
Well, it's hard. I'm very conscious of it. It's really hard because that may really just mean not doing as many deals. Because the smart thing to do is require everyone to have 15 or 20% down payment.
Yeah. Have
every borrower to verify where their rehab money is, even to control it so they're not using it for other projects, right? But what's going to happen is, unless every other lender in the valley does that same thing, you're not going to be doing loans. So you've got to weigh, how competitive do you want to be in the current market versus what common sense and best business practices are telling you. So that's a really hard internal debate for me right now. Yeah. Because I always like saying yes to people. I like doing deals, but you've got to be super smart and conscious of... Because it also is based on how much volume you have out, right? Like, let's say, I'll kind of come back to it. So sometimes people will say, well, why did you buy that? Say this example I just told you, this house where I'm going to lose money. Like today, even if that deal was brought to me and I didn't see it different, that there, that the numbers were thin on it, I guess is what I'm saying. I wouldn't buy that today because I have more flips going on than I want to have. But let's say I didn't have a flip. I would take a thinner deal because I don't have another deal, right? But I won't take a thinner deal when I've got 3 or 4 because I don't want to add that complexity of another potential disaster. So I look at it the same way. So every lender is going to look at it differently depending on how many current loans they have in their portfolio, what kind of back-end financing they have on those, who's helping them fund those loans. So my answer might be different from someone else, right?
Sure.
Because they maybe only have 1 or 2 loans that they have, and they feel like, hey, if this goes bad, no problem, I'll be able to handle it. But I mean, if all my loans went down, I'm toast, right? Like so you've got to mitigate that. So I look at, that's why I track like what is it. I do the deal evaluation for the borrower, but also what that looks like for the lender.
Yeah.
Like, let's assume they don't ever do the rehab. Then what's going to happen? Let's assume they do the rehab, but it just takes longer to sell. What does that look like? And then what does that look like if the ARV drops 10%, 20%, So there's definitely something built into our underwriting or our modeling to know that if something doesn't go as planned and it takes longer than they're thinking, what does that look like for us to get out of the deal? And then if it does escalate quickly, where, I hate being the bad guy, but sometimes you got to be the bad guy and give people the bad news of like, hey, you're overpriced. If you don't change the price, I'm being more direct right now than I would be with the borrower, but
Sure.
like basically, if you're not going to change the price, your loan's past due anyway. Like if you're not going to change the price, we need to sell the house. If you're not willing to sell the house, like I need to take the house back.
Right.
So that's obviously why we lend in first lien position. So ultimately, we would have the ability to foreclose or take the property back and handle it maybe the way that it should be handled
Sure.
to get sold. So yeah, I don't have a crystal ball either.
Yeah.
The reality is we're just going to have to deal with it. Hopefully, we're being smart about it and weighing that. How competitive do you want to be versus, honestly, to be smart, you just say, yeah, I'm requiring 30% down from everybody. But to do that, I'd probably have to offer way lower rates. So there's so much to it. The smartest way to do it is to just lend your own cash that doesn't have a burn rate on your back end and ask for a pretty good down payment and only to borrowers that are super experienced.
Yeah.
So,
sense.
but you may not be doing very many loans.
Yeah. So how many of your, let me ask you this. So how much, and you don't have to mention this or not, but what's the most you've had like lent out or maybe not quantity, but and even like number of deals have you actually lent out on?
So, total, I like historically for the last 9, for the first maybe 2 or 3 years of doing this, it was kind of more of for fun and just a hobby because I was still flipping more hardcore, and it was, back then I had self-directed IRAs and stuff. And I'm like, let's lend it to other people, right? And so not like a new concept, just at the time it was new to me.
Right.
And so for the first 3 or 4 years, like we were doing it, but it was just kind of like on the side. And then so I'd say of the last 9 years of doing hard money, really the last 5 have been super focused about trying to grow it. So since then, we've done almost 600 loans, and I think it's now almost closer to 130 million in total fundings. Like right now today we have like 110 active loans out.
110.
Yeah, and about 30 million in volume. So that does keep me up at night.
Yeah.
So I go through the list every week and kind of look at what I think are troubled loans, right? And the reality is of all those, like some of the ones that just started may become problems down the road, but of the ones that are kind of like, hanging out there a little bit, I'd say, I'm like pretty worried about 3 of them, but we have a plan in place to deal with those. And so the key to all this is like when things go bad, you got to make sure you have really good relationships and communication along the way. Right. Because if I can talk to a borrower and be like, guys, this isn't going to plan, what are we going to do? And if they don't have an idea, it's like, well, let me, we review what it all means when they're not paying the loan back on time. So communication and relationships is huge. If I just went by the book and said, all right, your loan was due in 6 months, you didn't pay us back in 6 months, we're filing a notice of default, like a robot, right? We're filing a notice of default, foreclosing. Like I would have been out of business years ago. Not, 1, because I wouldn't have any borrowers, but 2, because that would have been, I would have self-inflicted wound because I would have ended up foreclosing on properties that were like 3/4 of the way done, and then I would have had to deal with all those, and I probably would have lost and never even gotten my principal back because I would have had so many houses.
Yeah. So
you've got to work with my thing is I'd rather do like 10 loans with one person and kind of work with them along the way than just do one and like, oh, you didn't pay after 6 months, great, default rate of interest, multiple fees, because ultimately actually that's benefiting me to be cooperating with them
Sure.
because they're going to continue to work to solve the problem and sell the house, which is what we all want, right?
Right.
There are cases where things just, like it gets out of control, and we've had to foreclose just twice. We have a couple going on right now. And then there's other things we had to work out where we did like a deed in lieu, but like when you look at like an actual default rate on our loans, it's been super minimal. But again, like you said, we're all riding the roller coaster going up. So it's easier to get off when it's going up than when it's free falling, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
And so with people that are, I mean, because we have listeners across the U.S., so people that aren't necessarily local, they can't contact you. What would be a good way for someone to find a hard money lender that's maybe starting out? What would be some of the questions they would ask the hard money lender too?
cool. So yeah, if you're like starting from ground zero and know nothing, find a network that is reliable and above board ethical. So here, I know you guys are part of Renatus, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's great resource. I like as well all the local RIAs, the Real Estate Investor Associations.
Okay.
So there's the Northern RIA, there's the Utah Valley RIA, and then there's two RIAs in Salt Lake, the Utah Real Estate Investor Association with Jeff and Rebecca Deering. They're phenomenal. And then I'm on the board to kind of just help out of the Salt Lake Real Estate Investors Association that Miranda Wall's the president of. And that's a great resource. So you go to those RIAs and you say, hey, I'm new. I want to do deals. I need help finding financing. Who are some private lenders that you guys all work with?
Right.
You're going to get 5, 6, 7, 8 referrals, right? Obviously, you can Google stuff, look online. But, I mean, if you don't know anybody, go back to that hard part. Like, go look at houses, see who's flipping houses. Just start talking to people.
Yeah.
You're going to find a referral, and then that referral will give you another referral. Just ask questions. But obviously, the easiest way is to go to the RIAs, find other people that are flipping, and ask them for referrals.
That's good. That's smart too to get referrals when you're, especially when money is involved, anything like that. Referrals is better just in anything. But I had a partner of mine. I was actually a lending partner in this deal, but before she came to me, she went into the Facebook groups, and someone posted, I do 100% lending, and it was a complete scam. So that he wanted like 2 points up front, so she sent him the money. She sent him her credit information or social. He stole the money, and he actually opened credit cards in her name, and it was just a nightmare for her.
Yeah.
Because she didn't do her due diligence, and she paid for education, like we were saying before, right? We all make those mistakes. So nothing against her. She just was excited to get the deal done, and just didn't. Things happen. So I think it's to add to your point, by getting referrals are really important, where someone's like, okay, I've done deals with Matt Strong, that he's a good person to do with, as opposed to just some random Joe Blow on the internet.
Well, and I think it's human nature too to like, we all fall for it in different areas of our life. Maybe it's not business, but maybe it's something else. Maybe it's relationships, right? Or like, you want something to be maybe easier than it is. And so it's like, say this example is like, oh, I was looking for a hard money lender. Here's 100%. Wow, this is amazing, right? Like, I didn't even need to look, and now I have the person, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want to believe sometimes what you want to believe, just in general. Like, I do that, because that person probably inherently is super honest and giving or whatever, so they just assume that everyone's going to be like that, right? Or maybe the cynical person, that's going to be the person that's always asking like a million questions, because they're just by nature just maybe kind of cynical or whatever. So I don't know, that like you got to be aware of where you're at and what arena you're in, because you can get taken advantage of big time, by borrowing money from the wrong person. Like, for example, ask them what's going to happen, especially when you're asking referrals. Ask them what's happened when it didn't go as planned, because nobody needs help with anything. No one needs a contract. No one needs anything signed, or no one needs any documents if everything goes as planned. You're honest, they're honest. You borrow money, you pay them back, right? But it's like, what happens when things don't go as planned? Like, that's when you need a good real estate agent, when things don't go as planned. You don't need an agent when things go great, right? No one does, because everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. But when things get off course, then what happens? That's really how you want to ask the questions, like what's going to happen when things go off course. And then, I mean, we could talk about it, but there's red flags, right? Like, let's say a lender. So historically, my borrowers are taking about 7.5 to 8 months from start to finish right? But we're setting usually the loan up for 6 months, and they're usually telling me it'll be a 3 or 4 month deal, right? So let's say you have a lender. So knowing that, then on average it's going to take 7 to 8 months, right? You may be a rock star and you're always within 6 months, but talk to anybody that's flipping multiple homes, and some of them are going on a year, right? So let's say you have a lender and they're like, oh yeah, we'll do a 3 month loan, you know? It's like, well, why would you give someone a 3 month loan when you know it's going to take at least 4 months or 5 months? So there's red flags you could look for, you know, because what they're maybe doing is at 3 months, if you don't pay, they know you're not going to pay. It's like, oh, here's 2 more points and a, you know, or whatever, right? Or they may be lending to own where they know you're getting a good deal, and they're like, make it look so easy to get into. It's like, oh, we'll give you like a 3 month loan, 100% financing. Maybe they want the deal themselves, right? So they'll quickly foreclose or make life difficult for the borrower so they can't get over the finish line. So, I mean, there's definitely some questions you could ask. You know, just like I'm going to be interviewing the borrower, you know, you want to, even though you maybe don't know all the questions to ask, you want to try and interview the lender to see if it's going to be a good fit. Because really, they, you know, the hard money lender, if they're in first position, they have the big hammer, you know. They could make your life difficult with, I mean, our note and our documents, they're really rock solid. And the way they read, I mean, it would pretty much allow us to do some pretty nasty things to borrowers, like, you know, with fees or whatever. But then that goes back to what your, you know, how do you actually operate your business and deal with people? But you could really, you know, where you think you have some leeway, you may not have the leeway if you haven't fully read all the loan documents.
What should a person be looking? How are the loans generally structured?
That's a great question. So you can, like any game you're playing, you can play it however you want. I mean, within the rules of law, right? So when you're loaning or borrowing, you know, you've got to be aware of lien priority and lien position, right? So first lien position, other than maybe a federal tax lien or property taxes, is always going to be the first thing to get paid off when the property sells, right? So if you borrow $100,000, it's called first lien, first deed of trust, first mortgage, you know, that lender has priority. So one of the things that it's set up is we always lend in first position. There are lenders out there that will lend in second position or junior position or subordinate position. It all means the same thing, is you're lending behind the first position loan. So, the other thing that a gap lender, I know that's a word that a lot of people use, is a gap lender, right? So we structure our loans to be in first position. We do allow a gap lender, a second position lender to come in, but that second position has a different, you know, they're in a different spot, right? Yeah. So if things go south, you know, they're like, in this case, if there's 2 loans, they're the last to get paid. If there's not enough left over, then they either have to take less or the first lender needs to foreclose to wipe their position out so that they can take the property back. So from the borrower, let's talk about it first from the lender's perspective. There's risk based on what position you're in. So first position lien is the least risky. Second position and above is the next. And then an unsecured position is the most risky position at all, which I see happen all the time.
Really?
Oh, all the time. All the time.
Wow.
And usually it's a trust thing where you're like, hey, Jana, you want to lend me $50,000 for this flip? Sure. You're like, sure, let's do it. It happens all the time, and it's scary. Then what's going to happen? Jared's a good dude. Let's say he gets upside down on the house, though. He may be the best guy in the world. The deal went south, but there may be no way for him to pay you back, right? Now, if you would have secured your position with a deed of trust and a note, at least there's a record on county that you have to be dealt with, right? Or let's say Jared dies, right? Or something like that. It's like his business partners are like, well, he didn't borrow money from you. We don't owe you anything, right? So documenting it all, you know, best practice, and then going a step further, making sure as a lender you totally understand what priority you have when the home sells. And again, always try and look at it, okay, what if things don't go as planned? Human nature is you don't want to look at like what could go wrong, right? But you've got to analyze your risk, right? Like so if I borrow money from these people, when it goes to sell, how does this, like, you've got to understand, how does this work? Who gets paid back first? Who gets paid back second? You know, maybe a new flipper like promises their mom, well, I'm going to pay you back first, right? And that's just like a non-recorded position.
Yeah.
He may really want to do that, but there may not be money left over, right? So you've got to understand. And then as the borrower, I guess the same is true. You've got to understand who you're borrowing from, what position they're borrowing in, what expectations they have, because you may have, let's say you get first mortgage and second mortgage when you buy the house, like an 80-20, right? Let's say you have me do 80% to buy, and then you have a gap lender, whatever, a junior position lender do the 20%. Let's say the 20% has different terms as far as, let's say they're only wanting to do a 5-month loan with you, but I'm going to be willing to do a 6-month loan with you, right? So, it can get complicated, right? So you want to make sure kind of, in a way, you're setting things up so everyone you're working with, their interests are aligned with yours as far as like timetable or something like that. Or, so, I don't know, like there's so much that can go into it, but the fundamentals would be understand lien priority, what position people are in, who's recording things, either as a lender, what you're recording, the property, and then as the borrower, who you're having do it and what position they're all in, who gets paid back first. And then have a really good title company that can help you make sure that, the title's clean and stuff. That actually usually happens just by default because you've got to go through a title company anyway, and someone will kind of catch some of that stuff for you. But sometimes you think, like, you also got to remember that we're all in this game of, say, there's a house that's being purchased to be flipped and then to be sold, right? Everybody that's going to be involved with that transaction is going to be looking at it differently. The title company is going to be looking at it not because they're flipping it, just because they're doing the title work.
Yeah.
So there may be things that are obvious to them that could be a concern, but it's not like they're not disclosing something to the borrower. They're just focused on their part of it, and they're doing it right? And then the lender may see something different than the borrower, but the borrower is the one actually doing the deal, right? And then the contractor, he may feel like, hey, this is great. I'm going to take 4 months on this job. But the borrower really wants it done in 2 months. So there is an art to like asking questions and setting expectations and kind of laying out your game plan as the borrower to kind of get as much help as possible for you to get to the goal line. I see that all the time where there's conflicts of interests, even though you think everyone's in it to help you, but they may not be because they want you to fail. Everybody's got different motivation, right? Everyone's seeing the same game a little different because they're playing a different role in the game.
Biggest thing is communication.
Yep.
I mean, if as a borrower or lender, either way, if you're asking as many questions, even if it's almost an annoying point, but you're asking all the questions so that you understand everything and actually see things documented. So what you're saying is actually what it says in the paper. Never just trust something to sign it, because that's, like I said, you run into major issues. But so just communication is biggest. So when I'm trying to find a new hard money lender, if I'm, would it be weird, or has someone actually asked, like, can I talk to someone you actually lent money with?
Yeah.
So what I mean.
Yeah. Usually it happens in reverse, where I get referrals,
Okay.
where they've already talked to the person, and then that's why they call me. But I like. And if your lender's hesitant to give out a name, right, that's maybe a red flag too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and then it just goes on again for best business practices. I and I'm definitely not perfect, and I'm sure I've, rubbed people the wrong way. But, even a deal that's going bad, I always like to treat them with respect and kindness and everything, because part of it is just like, I'm not a combative person to begin with. I don't necessarily, I'm not always looking for a fight or an argument, like that's just not my nature.
Yeah.
But two, it's also self-serving, because if something is going bad, even though we do have the hammer, with cooperation with the borrower, it actually can make our life way easier when we have a situation go bad to just maintain a great relationship. I have a deal right now where you name what could have gone wrong, and I think it's gone wrong, like unsecured money, people lending that didn't know what they were lending in second position, taking way longer than it should. The path is clear that the house is not going to make money. And so if I just would have told that borrower, hey, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're doing, like, we're foreclosing, get out, like, I'm so pissed that you didn't, Instead it's like, let's sit down and talk. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually funding the rest of the rehab and kind of controlling it, and he's kind of giving me permission, because he's kind of just given up. He's like, I'm peace out, right? Like,
Right.
and so, and it's not what I want to do, but the reality is that's my clearest and quickest path to get the home sold and the money back for my investors, right? I mean, it could still work out if I just said, great, forget it, we're foreclosing, we'll talk to you in 5 months. But maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I see, hey, who knows what could happen in 5 months? The house could burn down, someone could break in and vandalize. I'd rather get this thing done, get it sold. And it only works because, I mean, I'm hoping I've maintained a pretty good relationship with the borrower where, it's a tough conversation to say, hey, this is going bad, right? Like, do you want me to foreclose or do you want to work together on it? And so you've got to have a good relationship with people just in general in life, right? Like, not just for this, but overall life lesson.
And real estate especially, well, just being an entrepreneur, it's relationship basis.
Yep.
And so I'm curious, and I love how your take on handling tough situations. So have you had where you had a tough situation with the lender or with the borrower, excuse me, where you had to like, this isn't working, we had to do X, Y, Z, and then afterwards they still and you guys both agreed to lend on a different deal. Has that actually happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes, but on a couple of the ones where it was super extreme, where like it really didn't work out, I just don't think those people ever, they didn't want to flip anymore. Right? But there's been plenty of situations where it clearly didn't go as planned. I have one borrower, I'd mention his name and he probably wouldn't care, but maybe later I will. He's got like 30 deals going. I don't have all of the loans, but he's got loans with like every hard money lender out there. He's he's an awesome flipper.
Yeah.
He just bam, 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 goes. But he's great because he's totally honest. He's like, listen, I lose money all the time. I'm getting sued by this guy, But he's so transparent that's where it goes back. Like part of it's like, wow, I really like you because you're like so honest about it. But in a way, he's a huge risk, right? Because he can only control what he can control.
Yeah. A lot on his plate.
So, but yeah, I lend to him all the time, right? Because I'm kind of like, you know what? You're going to figure it out, right? And so, and he's been doing it forever, right? But if I can, I'll tell you about, I've been on the other side of it in 2008 when, I had a foreclosure. I had short sales on properties that I owned, and that was no fun. But I think I learned, one, because I was scared, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, So we had a spec home we were building. This was probably right around 2007, about 80th South and 10th East. I'll never forget it. We bought 3 papered lots, just papered, right? They hadn't had the utilities put into them or anything, and we were kind of new to that part of it, and so we're like, yeah, we can do this, And so we got into it. We were building spec homes, and everything just turned, right? And so we were stuck, and it was so clear that this wasn't going to work out. And so, like, it was awful. I mean, we could go into that whole story, but it was like dark days. You're thinking about bankruptcy and sleeping in your car, and, you got 3 kids. And so I'm like, we got to go talk to the bank, right? So it was a credit union. So we went and talked with, I don't know, actually, it wasn't a credit union. It was a small local bank. And so we got a meeting with the vice president, and we went in there. And I'm sure we weren't his first people to come talk to him, but we're like, Bob, this is what's happening. We have these construction loans, they're half finished. We're not going to make any more payments, right? Like we told him, I was like, we'd rather like make our own mortgage payments and get food for our family than payments, it's really hard. And he was like, he could have been a jerk and been like, forget it. Okay, great. Get out of here. We're suing you. We're foreclosing. Good luck, But he was like, great. Well, let's talk about it. What needs to be done? What's left on the home? What do you think these will realistically sell for? And, that's where I learned a ton just in that hour meeting with him about how to react, with borrowers when it goes south. And he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I think he could sense from us that we were going to, he's like, we're going to keep funding the deals. Don't worry about paying us. Get these houses done. Even he let us list them. Wow. He's like, list them. Obviously, you're not making any money on these. You're not taking a commission. You're not doing anything. But get these houses sold. And it was like, wow, really? That's, because it's like he could sense that if he didn't do that, he was going to lose way more money.
Right.
One, he was a good dude and he had common sense, but he also understood like he's going to lose way more money by just saying, get out of here with half-finished houses. And so that was a great lesson for me as a borrower to be like, oh, okay, yeah, just always communicate, be upfront. When things are going bad, tell them what they're going bad. Don't lie. If it's really crappy, just tell them it's crappy,
Yeah.
and then ask for help on how to get out of it.
So, and you were upfront with it too. You came to them and I think that's a big thing. Like we mentioned before, is the communication's huge.
Yep.
You would talk to them face to face. I mean, I'm sure it was hard to have the conversation.
Oh, I was so scared.
I mean, I bet you were probably sweating bullets when you're in
Yeah.
the waiting room. Like, I tell this guy I'm not going to make any payments.
Yeah.
And probably assume the guy was going to be livid and pissed at you. But you guys took the courage to do that, and it ended up working out because there was no foreclosures happened. Just went to
Those
the
ones,
seller.
no. Yeah, they allowed us to sell it for what was less than owed, right? A short sale.
Sure.
And that was like a home run victory for
Yeah,
us,
yeah,
right?
of course.
I mean, we had sunk some of our own money into it, so it's like we lost all that.
Sure.
And then
But it could have been so much worse.
could have been so much worse. But more than anything, it kind of mentally and psychologically freed you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine that pressure of just,
Oh, yeah.
it's like it's better to know the worst case scenario
Mm-hmm.
than to avoid knowing about it. Because
Yeah.
it's still bugging you, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's just going to be pestering, like, what could be
Yeah.
going on? What could be going on? And it's like, well, let's just find out what's really going on.
Right.
And so that's why you just went straight to them. And that same mindset, I think, works when things start to not go well on a flip, right? Like, say you've overpriced it, come to grips with you've overpriced it. And just come to grips with, you may lose money on this deal.
Yeah.
I see so many people just holding out. Well, I can't lose money on this deal. It's like, okay, you can't, but you're going to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're going to have to understand that. And so some people get to where they don't want to look at the details because they don't want to know.
Yeah, avoiding it does not fix
Avoiding
the
it does not fix it.
And even like you said before, like the peace of mind of it, even though you're knowing you're going to lose, but knowing that what you're going to lose, or knowing what the actual real circumstances, as opposed to like just the dread of what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Fear just in general is always about things that's in the future.
Yep.
If I'm in the mountain walking, and this is a bit of a tangent, but if I'm out mountain walking in cliffs, I'm not worried. I'm worried about me falling. So in the future, if I see a snake, I'm worried about the snake biting me. If the snake bites me, I'm not scared. I don't have any fear about that anymore.
Right.
So the point is just jumping in there like you did, and instead of hiding from what could be,
Yeah.
facing it head on. That's
Yeah,
huge.
real estate investing is a balance of having that mindset of abundance, positivity, gratefulness. It's all good. Like, things are going to work out. But then you also have to blend that with being super realistic about
Yeah.
exactly how the situation is, right? And it's so much easier to be optimistic and positive when you're first starting a deal or when you're evaluating it, especially when it's new. It's like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
And then it really sucks when it doesn't go as planned, especially if it's one of your first couple deals, right?
Oh,
because
yeah.
that could derail you quick,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I'm
And-
sure a lot of people step away after that.
Yeah. No, for sure they do. And so actually I've benefited over time by continually do deals, because just like you're going to have bad luck or make stupid decisions on some, you're never perfect, right? And so karma's going to work for you too. Like, you're going to make more money on some deals than you ever should have.
Right.
But it's going to kind of, like, I think this is pretty close to being accurate. I was talking about this with someone the other day, where of all the flips I've been a part of, I would say, 10% is pretty solid where we've lost money. And then I would say on the flip side, 10%, we made way more money than we should have, because it was either dumb luck, the market going up, or we got lucky, or we got that buyer that jumped on it day one and paid cash, right? And then I think the bulk of them fall in that 70 to 80%,
Yeah.
where they, plus or minus, they pretty much just went as planned.
Right.
So I think flipping, to be successful, if you can pull it off and you have the resources, you actually do benefit from a little bit of a world of madness of doing multiple at a time. As crazy as it sounds, right? Like, I think it helped me to buy this house that I'm going to lose money on, because sometimes it just builds momentum to start looking harder at houses, looking harder at deals, and then I'm more motivated to find an even better deal
Right.
Yeah.
than this one, right? And so, but everyone's got different capabilities and resources. The last thing you want to do if you don't have the resources is do too many, because you're just going to create a snowball that you can't stop, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a train wreck, right? So you do have to kind of walk. You can't walk quicker than you can walk, you're right, and you got to learn to say no. That's sometimes where I fall into problems. I love the hard money lending and flipping as well, because it's all quick.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't think I'd be a really good long-term land developer
Yeah.
because I just run out of patience, right? Like I like, I like quick
Agreed.
music,
Yeah.
I like fast stuff,
Yeah.
I like deals coming, like
Yeah.
let's do this one tomorrow. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's buy this. Let's go, So I like things moving pretty quick, which benefits me a lot, but sometimes I'll overlook some details because it's like, let's go.
Right.
But if you're overall underwriting everything to like a realistic model, I think you're always going to be okay because you're going to lose on some, you're going to win on some. I always laugh when people that have flipped forever say they never lost money. I'm like, man, that's amazing.
Right?
I must suck.
My first job lost quite a bit of money. The very first one, and it was very painful to say the least. But yeah, it's all mindset, 100%. And I think the speed of it. That's kind of why when I got into wholesale, I really liked it. Like I find a deal. I'm good at finding deals. I find a deal, get in a contract. 2 weeks later, I got paid. I'm like, this is amazing. Why am I waiting 4 months to get almost paid the same amount?
Yep. And the other thing, just overall in investing, I think it, especially now with social media and everyone posting about this and that,
Right.
It can be super tempting to want to do everything, right? Like, oh, now I want to be a wholesaler, right? And
Yeah.
at some point, you have the skill set that you have, and find that lane that you're going to be really good at, and just keep doing it over and over and over again. In all my years, I've dabbled in it a little bit, but we're talking like super small, like a couple different mailers. Like I have done next to zero marketing.
Right.
Zero. I'm just not great at it. My mind doesn't think in very detailed processes. It actually does, but to implement it's a little harder for me.
Right.
I am a very detailed analytical person, but I'm always amazed, when Cody Hoffine got started wholesaling, and I knew him before when he was my insurance agent, and so when he got started on it and kind of getting his groove going, he came over to my office and sat down with me and and I'm like, dude, this is like amazing to me because I don't it's just his detail and processes and follow up and systems. It just blows me away. I'm like, I don't think I can ever get to do that, So I guess what I'm saying is stay in your lane, right? Like maybe not everybody's supposed to be a wholesaler. That's
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
And I'm fine piggybacking off of your deals and buying them and letting you do the marketing.
Right.
Because maybe I'm better at flipping, right? So
100%.
I don't have to be you. You don't have to be me,
Yeah.
right? But if it works out where we're the same, then that's great. Let's collaborate. But, everyone can play a different role, right? Like I could be the hard money lender on a deal and not flipping it and not the wholesaler that found it, So, or I could be the title person or I could be the bird dog. I have a real estate agent that bird dogs houses for me all the time. I'm meeting him at 1:30 to go look at one. And that's kind of been, as I've looked at it, that's kind of been more of my MO. Create relationships, network, and that's how I find my deals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do
And
it.
for years and years and years, to be honest with you, it was just the MLS. I'd say of those 400 flips, 85% of them came on the MLS.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Just because there was probably a period in my life where I was like maybe a little antisocial. And I just like head down, find deals on the MLS, go do them,
Yeah.
And so there's deals everywhere.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Agreed.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so let me ask you, Matt. So you've been doing this for so long. If you can go back 15 years from the year one, day when you actually started to think about getting investing
Yeah.
and doing flips, if you could give yourself one word of advice, what would it be?
Oh. Have the expectation that you're going to never make anything more than like 60 grand a year. And even if you're having huge years where you make could have made 200 to 300,000 or whatever more,
Yeah.
flipping houses, don't keep as many as you could for rentals.
Okay.
If I would have kept even 10 or 20% of the houses that I flipped, especially when they were unbelievably cheap, I'd be we're talking 10, 20, 30, 40 million
Yeah.
millionaire, right? So that was one piece of advice, and I try and remind myself that today, because when I started, I needed to flip to make money, right? So
Yeah.
you're always flipping to make money, then you make a little bit more money, and then you start spending a little bit more. You get a bigger house, you get cars, and it's like, oh, now I have to keep flipping at this level to keep sustaining a lifestyle. But if I would have peeled off, there were 3 or 4 years where we were doing 50 to 60 homes a year.
Wow.
If we'd have kept 10 of those,
Oh yeah.
I still would have had probably the same standard of living. Those would all be worth millions right now, right? And kept them as rentals.
Yeah.
So if I could have kept them as rentals, I would have, done that, right? But your liquidity, your ability to get loans, some of that, But I've
Sure.
seen some, like Matt Atkinson, he's a local guy that is a huge investor. He figured out whether he had the money or not to buy. He has like hundreds of rentals, and so like he's done that really well over the years of keeping rentals. Because ultimately, long term, the only way to build true wealth is through long term rentals that are going to at some point
Amen.
be paid off.
Yeah.
And have a passive income. And my belief is that's never going to happen until the loans are paid off. Every rental I have, I don't ever get, even though we have cash flow, we rarely take anything, leave it in the operating accounts, because you're going to need to replace furnaces,
Right.
roofs, all that kind of crap. Again, you tell yourself when you start, oh, we don't need it, we can cash flow, right? It's like, no. If you're going to hold these for 10, 20 years, you're going to need to be plowing a ton of money back into them. So
Right.
at some point, building wealth. The other advice I would give myself is start early with good mentors, and don't be afraid to pay to get a jump start with the right kind of education and coaching. Honestly, I probably didn't start doing that until 4 or 5 years ago, believe it or not, and networking with the right people. If I could have done that and had that mindset when I was 24, 25, I guarantee you I'd be so much farther ahead, because I look back the last 5 or 6 years and I'm way farther ahead, because it's not because I'm doing anything better. I'm listening to better people. So now I do business coaching that I pay a lot of money for. I do networking that I pay a lot of money for. I'm actively involved in the RIAs and stuff, and I benefit a ton from learning what other people are doing. There's stuff you can spend money on that's going to be a complete waste of money, because it might be kind of a scam. But don't be afraid to invest in yourself and in continuing education and networking with really high level people. And I actually get a kick of I know you're fairly new to the game, right? I learn stuff from new people all the time.
Oh, right.
When I went back, there was a phase where I was really kind of felt like it was the Truman Show every day. I was like, oh, let's wake up, find some houses, go flip them, right? In a way, it was just too easy, because there were so many deals and maybe not as much competition. But I was getting burned out, because it was like every day is the same thing. I didn't feel like I was pushing myself. So that's when I went back to school and got my Master's of Real Estate Development. And I started that in 2013, right? So that was 7 years ago. And I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll just change directions and get it. I knew I liked real estate. I thought maybe I'll just change directions, get a job with a developer or something like that. But I quickly realized that probably what I was doing was the right thing. I just need to get better at it. But more than anything, it was wow, it's really cool. There's a ton of energy from these kids that just graduated college.
Yeah.
And now they're doing their master's program. I was doing it 13 years after I got my undergrad. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm an idiot. I need to network and rub shoulders with people more often. And so that group of guys that I went to school with, I still network with them all the time. Some of them are investors. So it's kind of you can burn yourself out by getting involved in too many groups, right? But really high quality groups, you're going to see the payoff 10 times.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So I guess that would summarize it.
It's good.
Be conscious and keep long-term rentals, finance them the right way, network, right, and then get good coaching and mentoring. Someone related to remember playing Super Mario Brothers when Nintendo first came out?
Yeah.
And once you learn the code to get a million extra lives, right? You could beat the game.
Right.
So it's it's in the game, so it's not cheating. But why not learn from someone that's already done what you've done, what you're trying to do?
Yes.
To get that learning curve shortened quite a bit. So it's hard though, because you don't want to spend money on stuff. You sometimes have an ego well, I'll just figure it out, right?
And there's cheaper ways you can do it. I mean, sure, there's educations where there's $20 to $40 to $100,000 just in real estate education. They're out there. But if you don't have a ton of money, there's ways where you can, the RIA, they do classes every week, every month, and and it's something like $100 a month or less than that, I think, to be part of the group. So even if you don't have a ton of money available, just a little bit, you can at least do something, get in there.
You create your own virtual network with guys, your podcast, other podcasts, right? YouTube videos. At some point though, those things have helped me a ton, not just in real estate, but in other areas of my life where I'm listening to podcasts and stuff like that, and I've learned a ton, and it kind of helps you think about what you're doing. But you can't replace, at the end of the day, being with people, talking
100%.
with them. And it's hard, especially as you get older and maybe have kids and demands on your time. But, my business has grown a ton from just being present and talking to people one-on-one, and hearing them out, whatever. So, I mean, you can be great that's why the internet's so awesome, right? Like you're going to be live in front of tons of people, and they're going to be able to feel like they're touching and feeling you because, they can see your name, your face, and stuff like that. So that's going to go so much longer towards your relationship building than just blasting people with emails or texts or, whatever, mailers.
Yeah.
Awesome. So people that are listening, if they want to get a hold of you, contact you, are you on social media? Do you have
I am. I'm really crappy at social media. I really I didn't join Facebook or Instagram till like four years ago.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm still like kind of learning how to navigate that. There's probably
Yeah.
some, maybe I'm a little bit self-conscious about it still. One of my goals for 2020 was, genuinely get better at social media, because there is self-serving, right? Like you do get business and exposure from
Absolutely.
kind of being better at social media. I think some people I'm turned off by it, but the people that do it genuinely. So anyway, I have social media, but I'm really kind of crappy. And you'll put my number on the link, but just my number, 801-244-3888.
Okay.
That's the best way. Text me, call, and then we can exchange emails and stuff like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's been phenomenal.
It's been great. We learned
massive.
a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, so
I
have
know
I.
what questions to ask now.
Yeah, good.
Exactly.
Are you
thank
busy?
you for having
That's
me.
what I'll ask.
Yeah.
How busy are you? Because I know you're going to overlook some stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I want you to say yes to this. Do you have a ton of stuff going on?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
let's do it.
But thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge with us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Appreciate it. So those that are listening, feel free to like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on the podcast, any podcast format, make sure to rate us as high as you can. We appreciate it, and share. And
We hope you liked that podcast. Stay tuned for next Monday for a brand new podcast and a brand new guest. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share.